Hello everyone, my name is the Storyteller, and today I will share with you some horror stories to help you fall asleep. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. But before that, write down in the comments where you are listening this and what time it is. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss upcoming horror stories. The town of Blackridge awoke to horror one crisp autumn morning. A body was found in the alley behind Miller's diner, posed unnaturally, hands folded across the chest, eyes wide open and mouth sewn shut. Detective Claire Rains crouched beside the corpse, studying the handiwork. The stitches were precise, deliberate, almost artistic. Whoever had done this wasn't rushed. They had enjoyed their work. A single note was pinned to the victim's shirt, written in bold black ink. 1 of 30. Claire's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a killing, it was the beginning of a countdown. 2 nights later, another body appeared. This time in the park, seated on a bench as though waiting for a friend. Same sewn mouth, same unblinking eyes. Pinned to the chest. 2 of 30. The victims had no immediate connection. One a cook, the other a librarian. Different ages, different circles. But the killer was methodical, ritualistic, and frighteningly calm. Claire realized the truth quickly. The Hollow Man, as the newspapers soon called him, wasn't just killing. He was building something, one corpse at a time. Claire felt his presence before she saw him. On late patrol, she caught a shadow at the end of the street, a tall figure, unmoving, watching. When she approached, the figure vanished. No footsteps, no trace, only a scrap of fabric left fluttering in the wind. Her phone buzzed, a new message. 3 of 30, you're too slow, Claire. The third body was found an hour later. The coroner's reports were chilling. Each victim's mouth sewn shut with surgical thread, fingers pressed tightly against the chest, as though they were guarding a secret. Claire paced her office, reviewing files. Each murder occurred on a different street, but all within walking distance of one another. It was as if the killer was drawing a map, one corpse at a time. The press feasted on the story. Fear spread through Blackridge like wildfire. People locked doors, closed blinds, and avoided the streets after sundown. But the Hollow Man thrived in fear, and he was just getting started. Claire returned home one night, bone-tired, only to find her front door ajar. Inside, on her coffee table, sat a neatly folded piece of paper. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, just the note. It read, 5 of 30 will be yours. Her blood ran cold. The killer wasn't just taunting her. He was promising her a personal stake in his twisted game. The 6th body was discovered at dawn, staged in the center of Blackridge's abandoned train station. Rats scurried around the corpse, but none had touched it, almost as if they, too, feared the work of the Hollow Man. Pinned across the victim's chest. 6 of 30. Claire examined the scene. The victim was positioned facing the station's broken clock tower, its hand stuck permanently at 3:00. Was it a coincidence? Or was the Hollow Man leaving a hidden message inside the staging? She scribbled notes, but her mind buzzed with dread. He wasn't random. He was deliberate, and she was starting to think his countdown wasn't leading to just 30 murders, but to something worse. The Hollow Man struck closer to home. The 7th victim wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel Marks, a reporter for the Blackridge Times, the same man who had been covering Claire's investigation with relentless articles. Claire remembered the last thing he told her. This monster wants an audience. If I stop writing, he'll find me. And the Hollow Man had. Daniel's body was found in his office chair, hands still resting on his typewriter, blood staining the unfinished story. His mouth stitched tighter than the rest. Pinned across his chest. 7 of 30, your silence is beautiful. That evening, Claire's phone rang. An unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Nothing, just breathing. And then faintly, 8 of 30 tonight. The line went dead. Claire scrambled her team, but the hollow man was always ahead. At midnight, another body was discovered in the middle of a playground. A woman, mid-20s, posed in the swing as though gently rocking herself. Children would find her in the morning. He wanted the town scarred forever. Claire worked late into the night, reviewing CCTV footage from around the 8th murder site. At 2:17 a.m., she froze the frame. A figure, tall, gaunt, dressed in dark clothing, a hood drawn over his head. But the camera caught something chilling. He paused, turned directly toward the lens, and raised his finger to his sewn lips. SHH. Claire's skin prickled. He knew she'd be watching. He wasn't just killing, he was communicating directly to her. The 10th body broke the pattern. Instead of being left in a public place, it was found in the woods, strung up by the ankles from a tree. The corpse swayed in the wind, pale face glowing under the moonlight. Pinned across the body. 10 of 30, I am closer. Claire clenched her fists as she stared up at the victim. The escalation was clear. The hollow man was tightening his circle, pushing her into a corner. And deep down, Claire knew the truth. The countdown wasn't about numbers. It was about her. Claire had barely slept. At 5:00 a.m., she dragged herself into the bathroom, only to freeze at the sight before her. On the mirror, written in red lipstick, were the words, 11 of 30. Her pulse spiked. She lived alone, the locks were untouched, no forced entry, and yet he had been here, inside her sanctuary. For the first time, Claire admitted the truth to herself. She wasn't just the hunter, she was also prey. Hours later, they found the 12th victim, an elderly librarian named Mrs. Henley. She was beloved by the town, known for teaching children to read. Her body was placed on the steps of the library, arms folded over her chest, with a book clutched in her hands. The book was open to a single passage. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Pinned across her chest. 12 of 30, do you hear me, Claire? Detectives swarmed on a suspect, a drifter who had been seen near 2 crime scenes. They arrested him, grilled him, pushed for a confession. But Claire wasn't convinced. His demeanor was wrong. He was sloppy, scared, desperate. The hollow man was none of those things. That night, as the suspect sat locked in a cell, the 13th body appeared in the town square. A local shopkeeper, displayed on a bench as though peacefully waiting for a bus. Pinned across his chest. 13 of 30, did you think I was caught? The hollow man was mocking them, again. Claire returned to her office to find an envelope on her desk. No postage, no fingerprints. Inside was a photograph. Sorry. Sleeping. Taken from inside her bedroom. Pinned to the back of the photo was a note. 14 of 30, you look peaceful when you dream. Claire's stomach twisted. It wasn't just about the victims anymore. He was inside her life, watching, planning. The 15th body pushed Blackridge into hysteria. This time, the victim was a police officer, Detective Lawson, Claire's partner. His body was found hanging upside down in the station's parking lot, uniform stained dark red. Pinned across his chest. 15 of 30, halfway there. Claire stood trembling beneath the swaying corpse. Her jaw clenched, her hands balled into fists. This wasn't random. The hollow man wasn't thinning the herd. He was dismantling her world. And she had 15 more deaths to stop before he was finished. The morning after Lawson's funeral, Claire received another envelope. This one wasn't a photo. It was a letter, handwritten, elegant script. You hunt me as though I were a beast. But you are mistaken, Claire. I am not a monster. I am a sculptor. Each death is a stroke of my masterpiece. 30 in total. You should be honored to witness it unfold. At the bottom of the page, 16 of 30. The letter was dated 2 days before Lawson's death. He had planned it long before Claire even suspected. A judge was found in his home, throat slit, gavel clenched in one rigid hand. On the wall above him, scrawled in his own blood, was a single word: balance. The hollow man was escalating, not just killing at random, choosing targets that meant something. Judges, police, librarians, shopkeepers, symbols of community, law, and trust. And every time, Claire was forced to read his signature. 16 of 30. That night, Claire awoke to a scratching sound. At first she thought it was a mouse, but the sound grew louder, scraping, dragging, moving through the walls. She gripped her pistol, heart hammering, ears straining. Then came a voice, muffled, distorted, whispering through the plaster. 17 of 30. Close your eyes, Claire. She tore the walls apart the next morning, found nothing. No wires, no speakers, no holes. But the voice had been real, she knew it. A bus driver was found at the wheel of his empty vehicle, parked neatly at the station. His eyes were sewn shut with black thread, his hands still gripping the wheel. Pinned to his chest. 17 of 30. He closed his eyes. Claire, why won't you? The town was paralyzed. No one rode buses anymore. Parents pulled their children from school. The streets emptied at night. Blackridge wasn't a town anymore. It was a graveyard waiting to be filled. Claire called a press conference. Cameras flashed as she faced the terrified townsfolk. We are not dealing with a man, she said. We are dealing with something worse, a predator who feeds on fear and believes he cannot be stopped. Her words trembled at the edges, but she stood tall. And then her phone buzzed. One new message, no number. A video. Lawson's body, still hanging, swaying in the night breeze. The hollow man's voice whispered from behind the camera. 18 of 30. The room spun around Claire. She gripped the podium to steady herself. He wasn't just ahead of her. He was inside every move she made. The next body was discovered in a church. A priest, Father Donnelly, laid across the altar as though in mid-sermon. His mouth was stitched shut with twine, his hands clasped in prayer. Pinned to his robes was the message. 18 of 30. Even the shepherd cannot protect his flock. The parishioners who found him would never set foot in that church again. Blackridge's last sanctuary had been defiled. Claire hadn't left the station in 3 days. Coffee cups and case files cluttered her desk. She traced patterns across the victims, desperate for a connection, some thread to tie them together. But the more she studied, the more she realized the truth. The hollow man wasn't choosing randomly. He was constructing something, a pattern she wasn't yet able to see. Her exhaustion was broken by a phone ringing, not the office line, her personal phone. A single text. 19 of 30. And an address. Claire drove alone to the address, an abandoned greenhouse on the edge of town. Inside, glass shattered underfoot. Rows of dead plants stretched into the shadows. At the center was the body of a florist, posed with flowers stuffed into her mouth, petals soaked with blood. Pinned to her chest. 19 of 30. Beauty wilts, Claire, just like you. Her hands shook as she dialed for backup, but she knew she was chasing a ghost. He was always gone before she arrived. Later that night, Claire returned home to find another envelope waiting on her doorstep. Inside was a small black photo album. Each page contained photographs of victims, posed, smiling, alive. Pictures taken before their deaths. On the last page was a new photo, not of a victim. It was Claire, standing in front of the station, taken that very morning. Scrawled beneath it in blood-red ink. 20 of 30. Claire locked herself in her office, staring at the photos, the notes, the timeline. And then it clicked. The hollow man wasn't just killing at random. He was selecting symbols. Each victim represented a pillar of Blackridge: law, faith, community, beauty, trust. He wasn't erasing individuals. He was dismantling the town itself. And when he reached 30, there would be nothing left. Her stomach turned cold, because one of those pillars she realized was her. They found him at dawn. The mayor of Blackridge, strung up on the flagpole outside City Hall, his body twisting in the morning breeze. Pinned across his chest, 20 of 30, the crown falls. Crowds gathered in shock, but no one spoke. Fear had silenced the town completely. Blackridge was collapsing, piece by piece, just as the hollow man intended. Claire knew she was being watched. She felt his eyes on her as she left the crime scene, as she entered her office, even in her own home. That night, she heard footsteps on her porch. Gun drawn, she flung open the door. Nothing, just the cool night air. But on her doormat, neatly folded, was a note. 21 of 30. That was close, Claire. You almost saw me. The next victim shattered what little hope remained. It was a child. 10-year-old Daniel Pierce, taken from his bedroom, discovered in the woods with his hands folded over his chest. His favorite stuffed bear lay beside him, pinned to his small shirt. 21 of 30. Innocence dies first. Claire nearly broke then, but she clenched her fists, bit back her tears, and swore aloud. I'm going to end this. Claire set the bait. Using herself as the lure, she broadcast a false message through the press that she had uncovered the hollow man's identity. That night, she waited alone in her home, pistol ready, heart pounding. Every creak of the floorboards made her trigger finger twitch. And then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down the hall toward her. The hollow man was finally here. The struggle was fast, brutal, and bloody. The hollow man was taller, stronger, but Claire fought with desperation. They crashed through furniture, shattered glass, and wrestled for the gun. Finally, a single shot rang out. The hollow man staggered back, clutching his chest. His mask, plain, white, and empty, slipped from his face. Claire froze. She knew him. A respected doctor, a man who had delivered children, healed wounds, smiled at townsfolk every day. He was no monster. He was one of them. His final words rasped through bloodied lips. 30 was never the number of victims, Claire. It was the number of days until I remade this place. Then he went still. The town would never be the same. Claire had stopped him, but the hollow man's shadow stretched long over Blackridge. And deep down, she knew, monsters like him never truly die. The corridor in a slow, dirty cloud. Someone's flare sputtered and went out. Someone's shoe stuck in a puddle of oily water. They improvised, they pushed on. At first, it seemed to be working exactly as the diagrams promised. Heat traveled up the shaft. The building shuddered and the monster made a sound like 1,000 scraping claws, a thing that had slept for ages and hated waking. The vents began to cough forth a high, thin keening, something inside them recoiling from the burn. But the heat also clarified the map. The thing's nests were lower than Ms. Alvarez had guessed, hair and bones and schooling notebooks matted around metal joins like the detritus of a long, private feast. Then the thing adapted. Where the smoke should have driven it toward a single, open mouth, the vents shrieked and bucked. One ignition point backfired. The motor in a ventilation fan seized, flinging hot coals into an adjacent shaft. A small fire, supposed to be controlled, flared into a hungry, angry tongue of flame that seared wiring and made the metal walls distort and sing. For a terrifying breath, the building felt like it might be the thing's accomplice, collapsing around them. Claire smelled flesh. Not only the metallic tang of old blood, but something more immediate, burn and scorched fur, and the chemical bite of adrenaline. On the radio, Jason choked out a word that sounded like triumph and terror at once. It's moving. Its static swallowed the rest. They had herded it. They had started a fire in a place meant to teach children how to add fractions and memorize dates. The thing answered with violence. Machinery failed. Sprinkler heads burst uselessly, shooting half-hearted jets into smoke. Somewhere, a scream was cut short. The plan had become a wager. They'd lit the pyre. Now they had to ride the consequences. Flames licked under classroom doors. The fire alarm's wail became a background note, something they had to move through rather than hear. Staff and students who had refused to stay away now scrambled, some with parental ferocity, some with blank terror. The corridors, once orderly arteries of school life, turned into a claustrophobic maze of heat and orange light. Claire sprinted to the auditorium to hold the last igniter, the one that would turn the auditorium into the building's funnel. The radio on her shoulder buzzed with frantic messages, teams reporting success, teams reporting tragedy. She crouched behind an overturned trophy case in the band room and watched smoke crawl along the ceiling tiles like a moving thing. When she pulled the cord, it felt like enacting a myth. A blowtorch of heat roared up through the ducts, and the thing moved as the diagrams had promised. Driven, forced, flushed. It didn't rush. It poured, a black current, yearning toward the loud, bright theater where people had been trapped like moths. The auditorium doors slammed as if by some animal intelligence. Steel bolts slid into place across them. Someone had pulled them shut in fear or strategy. For a moment, the monster's world and the human world collided in that awful, finite space. They watched as it arrived, a smear of shadow like oil across the rafters, claws ripping through air, jaws unhinged to swallow light. It landed on the stage with a noise like old leather tearing. The auditorium went liquid with screams. Parents clawed at doors, teachers shouted, and for the first time the thing had to expose itself fully to human sight. Claire's throat closed at the image. It was wrong in all the measuring ways, too many elbows, too many knees, ribs that bent like planks. It moved with a lopsided grace, a thing built to be uncanny. And yet, in that instant under spotlight and smoke, it looked, briefly, vulnerable. They threw everything at it, flares, a teacher's welder torch, a hastily rolled gym mat torched like a brand. The creature shrieked in a way that made blood run cold, a primal, ancient sound that seemed to tear the auditorium in two. It crashed through chairs and shattered the piano, claws snagging fabric and wood. Flames licked along its flanks. Black skin blistered and flamed away into ash. For a savage, humming heartbeat, it faltered. Then, horror of horrors, it adapted again. Under flame, the thing did not melt into harmlessness so much as transform. Smoke seemed to cling to it like a new hide. Pustules burst along its torso, and from them grew hard, chitinous plates that glistened like lacquered bone. Fire seared its old skin away, and something darker, tougher, grew in its place. It bared teeth that sparkled with scorched iron and hauled itself upward toward a catwalk, toward the ventilation exit that might mean salvation or slaughter. People were trampling toward exits. Someone fell down the center aisle. Claire ran. She saw two of the kids who had helped them throw flares carried out, their clothes smoking, faces ashen. Ms. Alvarez stumbled, coughing, a burn across her forearm. She looked at Claire with an expression that mixed grief, pride, and a dawning, terrible comprehension. "It changes," she rasped. "It learns from the burn. We've made it armored." Claire's stomach dropped. The pyre had hurt it. The pyre had also taught it how to survive. They had gambled and bought time. And in buying that time, they had given the thing a terrifying lesson. By the time emergency sirens began to converge on Crescent Valley High, the auditorium was a smoldering ring of human bodies and scorched curtains. The monster, whatever it had become beneath the fire, had vanished into a gulfing duct hole, leaving behind a trail of ash and the smell of sulfur. The auditorium doors were pried open at last. The air that rushed out tasted like iron and cindered paper. Parents wept. Some began to howl into the sky. Claire sat on the burned edge of the stage and felt the thickness of the night press against her. She had expected victory, had imagined the monster shrieking, collapsing, the police walking in to cuff a shaking thing, and instead she had a ragged victory that tasted of copper. 5 students were dead in their parents' arms. Several teachers and officers were in ambulances. Ms. Alvarez was in surgery with deep burns and the sort of injuries that would take months to quiet. The school's ventilation network was scorched into silence, the cost of their strategy writ in blackened metal. Detective Marlowe took Claire aside. He was older than she remembered, his face lined by sleeplessness and a grief that did not fit the shape of the town. "We bought ourselves some nights," he said quietly, voice splitting. "But it's adapting. We cornered it and it learned to armor. We hurt it. We also taught it to survive heat." Claire thought of the small faces she had seen at the assembly, bright cheeks, quick laughs, the slow hum of kids' lives, and felt the weight of her decisions fold in on her. They had saved dozens. They had cost lives. They had changed the monster. Outside, beyond the flashing lights, the vents sighed like the throat of a sleeping animal, and somewhere deep inside the walls something shifted, learning the geometry of flame. The battle had not ended. It had only moved to a new phase, darker, sharper, and far more dangerous. After the fire, Crescent Valley High became a fortress. Barricades at every door, steel shutters over windows, officers stationed in hallways. The students who remained were herded like livestock into classrooms, monitored constantly. Claire and Jason moved through the school at night, checking doors, reinforcing weak points and marking exits. Every corner, every vent, every maintenance shaft was scanned and secured. Ms. Alvarez patrolled with them, clutching the sketchbook and muttering about the creature's anatomy and habits. "It's smart," she said, voice low. "Not human smart, predatory smart. It learns patterns. It will strike where it sees weakness." Even with all precautions, the students slept poorly. Every drip of water, every squeak of pipes became a potential herald of death. And the vents, always the vents, whispered with promise. It came back at midnight, from the shadows above. The first warning was a metallic scraping from the ceiling. Claire grabbed Jason's arm, pointing to the vent. The sound grew louder, closer, punctuated by something that sounded like claws raking metal. Then came a scream from the art room. 2 students had been pulled into the ducts before anyone could react. Chairs overturned, spray cans tumbled, and a teacher tried to block the vent with a filing cabinet, unsuccessfully. The monster had changed. Blackened scars from the fire had hardened into chitin-like armor. Its movements were faster, sharper, more precise. It was learning from them, evolving. Claire shouted for the remaining students to move toward the reinforced gym, while Jason attempted to lure it toward the exit vents. The creature growled, a sound that shook the walls, and surged after Jason like a living shadow. They had planned a new pyre, bigger and hotter than the last. Flares, torches, and even fuel from the chemistry lab had been stockpiled in the gym. But as the monster entered the space, it reacted differently. Heat sensors in its skin, or whatever passed for a nervous system, detected the fire before they could strike. The thing leapt away from the flames, snapping a support beam in half and sending the gym doors crashing into the students barricading them. Screams filled the gym as people scattered. Claire fired a flare, striking the monster's flank. It shrieked, spinning, claws tearing into the walls. One teacher fell under its weight, pinned against the bleachers. Jason barely escaped as the thing vaulted over the scorched wood and vanished into the vents again. Claire realized with growing horror that fire alone was no longer enough. It had learned, adapted, and the school was becoming its labyrinth. Determined, Claire and Jason ventured into the maintenance corridors, following the sound of its movement. The vents groaned, the smell of charred flesh and metallic tang thick in the air. They crawled through narrow shafts, prying open covers and shining flashlights into every corner. Every shadow became a potential ambush. Somewhere above them, the monster shifted in the ducts, its body scraping metal, pausing only to sniff the air, tracking their movement. Claire whispered, "It's hunting us." Jason nodded. "We're inside its lair now, and it knows it." From a junction point, they saw it, hunched, armored, limbs bending in ways nature never intended. Its eyes glowed faintly in the light they shone. For the first time, it looked directly at them. It smiled, or at least its mouth twisted in something that resembled a smile. The monster struck without warning. Claws tore into the duct around Claire and Jason, splintering metal and spraying debris. The corridor became a chaotic hell of sparks, smoke, and panic scrambling. Claire tried to aim a torch at it, but the flame flared uselessly against its armored hide. Jason swung a crowbar, striking the chitin with a hollow clang. It hissed and lunged, knocking him against the wall. Claire ran, heart hammering, thinking only of survival. But the creature wasn't chasing blindly. It was methodical. It cornered them at a maintenance hatch, claws scraping the walls, jaws snapping. And then it paused. Its head tilted, listening. Every muscle in its body tensed. Then it vanished into the vents with a wet, sucking sound, leaving behind a trail of blood and the echoes of terrified breathing. Claire and Jason collapsed against the wall, gasping. They had survived, but the monster had learned, grown smarter, and the school was no longer a place of learning. It had become a hunting ground. Claire, Jason, and Ms. Alvarez huddled in the library. The map of the school spread across the table. Every hallway, every vent, every access panel was marked in red. "It's smarter now," Ms. Alvarez said, her voice trembling. "Fire alone won't kill it. We need traps. We need noise, light, anything to force it into the open. And then we finish it." Claire swallowed. "Finish it how?" Alvarez looked grim. "We lure it into the auditorium again. But this time, it won't just be fire. We're using everything we have. Chemicals, flares, broken furniture, anything flammable or sharp. We make a chamber, and when it enters, we strike." Jason shook his head. "We're insane." Claire's eyes burned with determination. "Or we die if we do nothing. This is our only shot." The plan was brutal, desperate, and terrifying, but it was the only chance they had to survive the night. Night fell over Crescent Valley High. Sirens had long since vanished, leaving the school eerily silent. Students were locked in classrooms, hands over mouths, trying to keep quiet. Claire and Jason moved through the maintenance corridors, laying improvised tripwires and torches. Smoke canisters were positioned near the vent exits. Every shadow, every corner, every screech of metal could be the thing, but they pressed on. A metallic scraping from above signaled its approach. Claire held her breath as the shadow moved closer, and the faint glint of its armored back was visible through the vents. They had baited it. The corridor smelled of oil and fire retardant, a chemical scent meant to draw it to the auditorium. The final showdown was near. The monster emerged from the vents like a living shadow, jaws unhinged, claws raking the floor. Its armor glinted in the dim light, black and wet, shining like obsidian. Claire ignited the flares and tossed makeshift Molotovs at its feet. The flames licked at its legs, but it did not falter. It had learned. It roared, a sound so piercing it made windows shiver. Jason triggered the tripwires, and a cascade of furniture fell, blocking its retreat and pushing it into the center of the auditorium. Smoke filled the room. Heat stung their eyes, and yet the monster advanced, relentless, its yellow eyes fixed on them. It was a test of nerves, of strategy, and of courage. The monster had forced them into its arena, and they were running out of options. Claire pulled the last igniter cord, sending a wave of flame across the stage. The fire roared like a beast of its own. Sparks flew, smoke curled, and the monster screamed, a high, keening shriek that shook the rafters. The creature thrashed, armored plates flacking, smoke filling its eyes. Every strike, every lunge, it became slower, weighed down by the fire and chemicals. Jason joined Claire, throwing the remaining torches directly at its face. Flames engulfed its head, mouth, and shoulders. It screeched and buckled, thrashing violently as the fire consumed it. Then, with a final, echoing shriek, it collapsed. Its body writhed, convulsed, and finally went still. The heat and smoke masked the silence that followed, a silence that felt like the calm after a storm. Claire fell to her knees, coughing, tears mixing with soot on her face. Jason leaned against the wall, exhausted, shaking. They had survived. They had won, but at a tremendous cost. Dawn broke over Crescent Valley High. The auditorium was a ruin of charred wood, scorched curtains, and the remnants of what had once been a living nightmare. Fire trucks arrived belatedly, spraying water over the remnants of the battle. Parents reunited with children. Injured teachers were loaded into ambulances. Claire and Jason were debriefed by the police, who still didn't fully believe the horror that had occurred. Ms. Alvarez stood beside them, exhausted but alive. "It's gone," she said, voice hoarse. "For now, but creatures like that, they always adapt. They always come back. We only delayed it." Claire looked at the empty, blackened vents above the auditorium. The memory of the glowing yellow eyes, the scraping of claws, and the soundless movement through the hallways would haunt her forever. Yet she also knew one thing. They had faced the unimaginable and they had survived. The school was scarred. The monster might return, but they were ready, wiser, stronger, and never willing to run again. Crescent Valley High would never be normal. But Claire and Jason had learned something every survivor knows. The fight doesn't end when the monster falls. It ends when you refuse to be its next victim. It started with a noise. Crescent Valley High was emptying out for the evening, the last echoes of laughter and footsteps fading down the hallways. Custodians pushed their mop buckets, teachers packed papers into leather satchels, and the hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. But in the abandoned gymnasium, beneath the clatter of a loose ventilation grate, something moved. It wasn't a rat, though that's what people would say later. Rats don't scrape metal with claws that long. Rats don't breathe like that, low, guttural, wet. The janitor, Mr. Haskins, was the first to hear it. He was sweeping the locker room when the sound drifted through the vents, a dragging, wet shuffle, like raw meat being pulled across tiles. He froze, grip tightening on the broom handle, sweat prickling his neck. "Hello," he called. The sound stopped. When he bent to look beneath the lockers, he saw two small yellow eyes staring back at him. By the time his coworkers realized he was missing, the only trace left behind was his broom, snapped in half and soaked with something too dark to be water. The next morning, rumors spread fast. Kids joked about Mr. Haskins running away or finally quitting the job he always complained about. But some noticed the police cars parked outside the school, the officers whispering to the principal, the "do not cross" tape around the gym doors. Claire Thompson, a junior with a sharp tongue and sharper instincts, caught a glimpse of the locker room floor before they covered it. The streaks looked like blood. By lunchtime, whispers turned into full-blown stories. He got killed by a drug dealer. He drank himself to death. He just left town. But the teachers seemed nervous, jumpy. Principal Reynolds kept wringing his hands, and the custodial staff worked with pale, tight-lipped faces. That night, long after the last bus left, a pair of sophomores snuck back into the building, daring each other to film a tick-tock in the gym. They didn't return home. The police searched until dawn. Their phones were later found in the girls' bathroom, screens cracked, cameras still recording. The last frame showed a figure, towering, hunched, with limbs too long to be human, crawling out of the shadows behind them. By the third disappearance, the staff demanded answers. Principal Reynolds locked the teachers inside the library for an emergency meeting. Detective Marlowe, exhausted and hollow-eyed, stood at the front. "There's something in this building," he admitted, voice low. "We don't know what it is. We don't know how it got in. But it's moving through the vents, the crawl spaces. It comes out at night." The teachers murmured nervously. Ms. Kent, the English teacher, scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You expect us to believe in some boogeyman. Kids are running away, that's all." But then the lights flickered. For 3 seconds, the library went black. When they came back on, Ms. Kent was gone. Her chair rocked slowly back and forth. On the table where her papers had been was a wet, 3-fingered handprint. The staff didn't argue after that. Authorities tried to close the school, but Crescent Valley's board refused. They didn't want panic. They didn't want bad press. So they ordered a temporary night lockdown. Teachers took shifts to guard the halls. The police stationed cars outside. Students were told to go home early. But the monster was patient. It waited. It learned. That Friday night, Officer Ramirez patrolled the East Wing alone. He heard the rattling in the vents, the clanging of metal, the scrape of something dragging itself closer. He drew his gun, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The vent above him buckled. Something heavy crawled across it, making the metal scream. He radioed in for backup, then screamed himself. By the time they reached him, the hallway was empty. His gun lay on the floor, barrel bent like tinfoil. His flashlight was cracked, still glowing faintly. The wall beside it dripped with long, wet streaks that led up into the air ducts. On Monday, the school tried to act normal. Classes resumed. Bells rang. Students filed in nervously, pretending things weren't wrong. But Principal Reynolds, pale and sweating, called an assembly. The gym bleachers filled with teenagers whispering. Teachers hovered near the exits, eyes darting nervously. "Students," Reynolds began, voice shaking. "You may have heard rumors. They are not true. Crescent Valley remains safe. We ask you to stay calm and focus on your studies." As if on cue, the lights cut out. Screams erupted. Kids shoved each other, scrambling to escape. In the chaos, no one noticed the thing that dropped from the rafters. Not until its claws tore into the first row of seats. And by the time the backup generators flickered on, 6 students were gone. The assembly was never spoken of in official reports. The police erased their notes. The principal swore everyone to silence, and the board insisted it was a fire alarm malfunction that caused the chaos. But the students knew. They saw the scratches in the gym floor, deep gouges no human hand could make. They saw the blood sprayed across the bleachers, quickly scrubbed away by morning. They saw the empty seats in homeroom, the classmates who never came back. Claire Thompson couldn't stay quiet. She scribbled everything she remembered in her notebook. The shape she glimpsed in the rafters, the way its limbs bent wrong, the glint of teeth far too sharp. She knew what she saw, and she knew it wasn't done. That night she texted her best friend, Jason. "We need to find it." Jason didn't reply for 20 minutes. Then finally, "Are you out of your mind? It's hunting us." Claire's last message before bed. "If we don't fight it, no one will." The next day, Claire and Jason met in the library. The smell of bleach still clung to the walls. "Think about it," Claire whispered. "It's always moving through vents. It comes out at night. That means it's hiding here in the school." Jason frowned. "Even if that's true, what do you want to do? Grab a butterfly net? This isn't a Scooby-Doo episode, Claire. It killed people." Claire's eyes hardened. "Exactly, which means we stop pretending this is normal. We map out the vents. We find where it's nesting, and we destroy it." Jason laughed bitterly. "Destroy it with what, Claire? Your algebra textbook?" But her determination was contagious. By the end of lunch, he had agreed to help. Neither of them noticed the shadow moving behind the stacks of books, or the low growl that slipped between the shelves before vanishing into the duct above them. Mr. Gray, the history teacher, was one of the only staff who treated the rumors seriously. He'd begun carrying a baseball bat between classes, patrolling the halls after school. One evening, Claire and Jason lingered to copy floor plans when they heard it, Mr. Gray shouting. They raced toward the science wing. The hallway was pitch black, the fluorescent lights dead. From the shadows came the sound of wood cracking, a scream, then silence. They found the bat first, splintered in half. A trail of blood smeared across the lockers led into the janitor's closet. Claire opened the door with shaking hands. The closet was empty. The trail ended at the vent cover, which had been ripped open from the inside. Pinned to the vent with a shard of the bat was Mr. Gray's lanyard. His ID photo stared up at them, smiling. By Friday, tension in the school was unbearable. The cafeteria buzzed with whispered theories: a serial killer, a ghost, a wild animal. That's when the thing struck again. Students were halfway through lunch when the lights flickered, plunging the room into semi-darkness. A wave of silence swept through the cafeteria. Then, from above, the ceiling tiles buckled. Something heavy crashed through the tiles, landing on a table with a metallic screech. Trays flew, kids screamed. Claire caught a glimpse of it, hunched, skin like oil, jaws unhinging wider than any animal she'd ever seen. Claws shredded tables as it grabbed a student, pulling them screaming into the duct above before anyone could react. By the time teachers swarmed in, guns drawn, it was gone back in the vents, dragging its prize with it. The cafeteria reeked of blood and fear. That night, news vans parked outside Crescent Valley High. Parents demanded answers, waving signs and shouting at the board. The mayor promised an internal safety inspection. Inside, Principal Reynolds stood in his office with Detective Marlowe. "We can't keep this under wraps," Marlowe said. "It's slaughtering them." Reynolds shook his head, sweat dripping down his temples. "If we admit the truth, the school is finished. The whole town will collapse. No, we keep it contained. Quiet, controlled." Marlowe slammed a fist on the desk. "Controlled? Look around you. You don't control it, it controls us." That night, as Reynolds locked up his office, a faint scratching sound rose from the vent above his desk. He looked up, heart pounding, just as something wet dripped onto his shoulder. He never made it to the door. The next morning, his office was empty. His chair spun slowly in the silence. On Monday, the school went into full lockdown. Metal detectors at the entrance, police stationed at every hallway, armed guards in the cafeteria. But fear still lingered in every corner. Students whispered in trembling voices, jumping at every creak of the vents above. Claire sat in homeroom, staring at the grates. Jason leaned close, whispering, "You think this will stop it? Cops, guns, they don't even know what they're dealing with." The PA crackled. Principal Reynolds' voice filled the room. Except it couldn't be Reynolds. He was gone, dead, or worse. Still, the voice echoed, "Remain calm. Everything is under control." Claire's skin crawled. She looked up. The vent above the PA speaker was dripping. The voice wasn't coming from the PA at all. That night, Claire and Jason snuck back into the school with flashlights and backpacks full of tools. Rope, a crowbar, a lighter, cans of spray paint. They moved quietly through the halls. Every shadow looked alive. Every drip of water echoed like footsteps. They reached the boiler room, where the main ventilation system branched out like veins. Jason pried open a grate, and the smell hit them: rot, damp fur, and blood. Claire shone her light inside. Scratches lined the metal. Tufts of black hair clung to the screws, and deeper inside the duct something glistened. They crawled in, hearts hammering. After 20 feet, the duct widened into a cavern carved out behind the walls. It wasn't just a hiding place, it was a nest. Clothing scraps, bones, and shredded textbooks were piled high. And in the center, a teacher's head, eyes open and glassy, resting like a trophy. Jason gagged. Claire grabbed his arm. "We're not leaving, not until we end this." The following day, the police stormed the school. Dozens of officers armed with shotguns and rifles swept the halls, clearing room after room. The students watched from locked classrooms as black-clad figures shouted commands. For a moment, it felt safe. Then the screams started. Gunfire erupted near the gym. A shriek unlike anything human echoed down the corridors, the sound of tearing flesh, breaking bones. Claire and Jason peered out their classroom window. Through the glass, they saw one officer yanked into the ceiling, blood spraying in a wide arc. Another fired blindly into the vents before being pulled inside himself, disappearing in an instant. By the time the gunfire stopped, the hallways were silent again. Only the blood dripping through the vents remained. Ms. Alvarez, the biology teacher, found Claire after school. Her face was pale, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. "I know what it is," she whispered. "I've seen its kind before." Claire froze. "What do you mean?" Alvarez shut the classroom door. "My grandfather told stories of creatures that crawl in shadows, parasites. They feed on fear and flesh, nesting in places where children gather. They've been around for centuries." Jason laughed nervously. "So you're saying this thing has been hunting schools for hundreds of years?" Alvarez didn't smile. "Not just schools, orphanages, camps. Anywhere the young are trapped, forced to stay. It feeds best when no one can leave." She slid a notebook across the desk. Drawings of twisted creatures filled the pages, sketches almost identical to what Claire had seen in the cafeteria. Claire swallowed hard. "So how do we kill it?" Alvarez's hand shook as she pointed to a single word scrawled at the bottom of the page. "Fire." The next night, the school hosted a mandatory assembly to restore calm. Parents packed into the auditorium alongside hundreds of students. Claire sat rigid in her seat, scanning the vents above. Jason whispered, "If it's going to strike, it'll be now." Halfway through the superintendent's speech, the lights died. Gasps swept the crowd. Emergency lights flickered on, dim and red. Then came the sound, metal tearing open. From the rafters it dropped, a nightmare of limbs and teeth, its skin glistening black in the red glow. It hit the stage, tearing through the superintendent in seconds. Screams filled the auditorium as parents rushed the exits, only to find the doors chained shut. The monster didn't just kill, it herded. It wanted them trapped. Claire grabbed Jason's hand, heart racing. "Now we burn it, or we all die." They met in the boiler room, where the heat trapped their breath, and the pipes sang like the ribs of some buried beast. Ms. Alvarez had sneaked in with them, clutching the sketchbook and a trembling flashlight. Her hands were soot-streaked. Her eyes were old with a knowledge that didn't belong to a woman of 37. "We don't have time for theory," she said, voice low. "You can't shoot it, you've seen that. You can't trap it, it crawls the vents. Fire's the only thing that will flush it out and burn those nests. If we can get heat into the ducts, we can force it into the open, make it vulnerable." Claire spread a blueprint of the school on a grease-smeared workbench. The vents branched like ribs, feeding every classroom and hall. They marked the choke points, the places the ductwork narrow, the service doors, the grease-trapped vents near the kitchen, the exhaust fans on the roof. If they could get a sustained blaze in the main shaft, the draft would funnel smoke and heat like a chimney, flushing the creature toward the biggest opening, the auditorium. Jason's hands shook as he packed rope and industrial spray cans into his backpack. "We could set controlled flare points," he said. "Lights, accelerant, a line. Get it running, then pull the fire alarm from outside to open the main vents and give it a path." His attempt at practicality sounded fragile. They all understood the price of being wrong. They recruited a handful of kids whose parents weren't at home, or who had no one to stop them. Teenagers whose bravery came from not having anything left to lose. The plan was childish and precise all at once. Split teams, timed ignitions, radios, and a final rendezvous at the auditorium to light the main pyre. Outside, the night pressed close like a lid. Inside, they moved like conspirators, students and teachers, a ragged army. As they crept through the maintenance corridors, the building hummed with a nervous energy, metal groaning and plumbing ticking. Someone swore softly when a vent shook above them, but the sound wasn't the monster. It was the building reminding them this was still a place meant for learning, not for war. Before dawn, they were in position. Sparks of courage flared in the dark. Ms. Alvarez looked at Claire and said, not unkindly, "You will have to do the last pull." The admission of duty landed heavy, but Claire felt it settle into her like armor. She swallowed and nodded. The plan had been made of hope and timetables. Now there would be only the seconds of action and the long fallout after. They struck like thieves, moving from shaft to shaft with the quiet steadiness of people doing something they already knew would hurt. At 3 points along the north corridor, Jason and two others doused rags and folded paper with aerosol, stuffing the bundles into service vents. The smell of fuel stung in their throats. Their hands were steady because their nerves had no other place to go. Claire stayed by the main control, watching the digital clock count down. The radios chirped with whispers, short reports, breaths, the small human noises that steadied them. Then one by one came the feeds. Flame. The first vent hissed and coughed, smoke bleeding into. It arrived in the mailbox without a return address. A glossy card with a smiling clown painted in blood red and gold. "Come to the carnival, we're waiting for you." Mara stared at it, heart thumping. The town's carnival had shut down years ago, shuttered after a series of disappearances that were never solved. No one in Crescent Valley spoke of it. Yet here was the invitation, pristine. She crumpled it at first, then smoothed it out again. Something primal whispered that she had to go, that she couldn't resist. The carnival appeared at dusk, seemingly out of nowhere at the edge of the forest. Flickering lights, peeling banners, and a faint scent of sugar and rot filled the air. Mara stepped onto the grounds. Rusted rides creaked in the wind, and shadows seemed to twist unnaturally. A carousel horse's eyes glinted like real teeth. From the darkness, a laugh, high-pitched, childlike, but horrifyingly distorted. She turned, and there they were, clowns. Faces painted, smiles too wide, eyes too dark, shadows moving in unnatural, jerking motions. One stepped forward, a juggling ball spinning endlessly in his hand. He bowed. "Welcome," he whispered, voice a grotesque melody. "Welcome to the Carnival of Shadows." Mara tried to leave. Every path she took twisted back into the carnival. The ride seemed alive, the laughter echoing from everywhere at once. A child's giggle led her to a tent. Inside, the clowns waited. One raised a scepter topped with a grinning skull. With a flick, the tent ropes tightened like strangling vines. The first scream pierced the night. Mara froze as she saw a man tied to a post, the clown cutting flesh with precision, painting smiles across his face. The man's eyes were wide with terror, his blood spraying like red confetti. Mara's stomach turned. She realized this was not a carnival, it was a slaughterhouse, and she was the next attraction. She ran through the carnival, dodging clowns that emerged from shadows, riding phantom rides, appearing in every reflection. Each step she took seemed to make the carnival grow larger, more twisted. The clowns didn't just chase, they anticipated, seeming to know her every thought. A clown leapt from a Ferris wheel, twisting unnaturally in midair, landing behind her. Another emerged from the funhouse mirrors, splitting his reflection into dozens of smiling faces. Mara's legs burned, lungs heaving. She tried to find the exit, any way to escape the painted horrors. But the carnival itself seemed to fight her, twisting paths, shifting tents, dark laughter echoing off invisible walls. Breathless, Mara stumbled into a tent larger than she expected. The air was thick with incense and decay. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long, grotesque shadows. In the center, a pit. Shadows writhed within, and something whispered in voices both familiar and alien. "Join us, or leave nothing behind." She peered down. The pit was filled with remnants of past victims, shoes, hair, and tattered clothing, frozen in a dark, viscous substance. Clowns began to circle her, slowly, patiently, their painted smiles wider than sanity allowed. Mara realized with crushing clarity. This carnival didn't just kill, it consumed, it reshaped, it made shadows of its victims. And tonight, she was part of the show. Mara backed away from the pit, trying to make sense of the horror surrounding her. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of distorted laughter and murmured names. Every shadow seemed to breathe, inching toward her. She noticed symbols etched into the tent's walls, clown faces, upside-down stars, circles filled with eyes. Ms. Whitmore's name, one of the missing girls from years ago, was carved repeatedly, smeared with dried blood. A clown approached, tipping its hat. Its painted smile stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. It spoke in a voice like broken glass. They stay forever. They become part of the show. Mara's stomach churned. The carnival wasn't just killing people. It was creating something new, twisting them into shadows that could be controlled. Her fear hardened into resolve. She had to survive or she would be next. She ran into a tent covered in mirrors. At first, it seemed like a refuge. She could see the clowns approaching from every angle. But soon, her own reflection began moving independently, grinning, twisting its face into something grotesque. She smashed a mirror with a metal pole and the reflection screamed, echoing her own terror back at her. A clown stepped through a broken shard as if it were a doorway. Mara swung the pole, hitting the thing squarely, but it laughed, shaking off the strike like water off stone. The mirrors shattered around her, reflecting not reality, but the carnival's nightmares. Victims stitched into the rides, clowns feeding on shadows, and Mara herself, bound and painted with a horrifying smile. She ran again, panic-fueled, knowing every turn could be a trap, every reflection a doorway for the clowns to strike. The sound of drums and organ music led her to the big top. The tent was enormous, its canvas stretching impossibly high. In the center, a ring of clowns awaited, all identical and monstrous, their painted faces gleaming in candlelight. Mara realized with a shock, she wasn't just being hunted, she was being herded, driven toward the center. The floor was littered with old props, knives, skewers, and broken carnival equipment. She tried to back away, but the ring closed. The lead clown raised a scepter, and shadows seemed to pour from it, wrapping around her ankles. The other clowns lunged. It was no longer just survival. She had to fight, or be consumed and added to the carnival forever. Mara grabbed a broken metal pipe from the floor and swung wildly. She struck one clown in the chest. Its body split apart like a grotesque puppet, only to reassemble instantly, unharmed. The realization hit her. These weren't human anymore. They were something else entirely, animated by dark carnival magic. Every injury made them more furious, faster, smarter. She darted behind a stack of crates, grabbing flares and tossing them into the center of the ring. Fire erupted, making the clowns screech and recoil. Mara noticed their movements became jerky, almost mechanical when forced to avoid flames. It wasn't much, but it gave her time. Time to reach the central exit if it still existed. Breathless and covered in sweat, Mara found an emergency ladder leading up to the tent's canvas roof. The clowns swarmed below, claws scraping against the fabric. She climbed, every handhold tested by fear and fatigue. From the top, she could see the carnival in its entirety, a twisted, impossible landscape of broken rides, shadows, and clowns milling like predators. She realized, escaping meant leaving the carnival from above, breaking through the tent, and running into the surrounding woods. But doing so would make her the focus of all their attention. Steeling herself, Mara prepared to leap, knowing that one misstep could mean her death, or something far worse, being consumed into the carnival's eternal show. Mara crouched on the canvas roof, heart hammering. The clowns below looked up, their painted smiles stretched unnaturally wide. They didn't move like humans, they twitched, jerking in perfect synchronization, anticipating her next action. She took a deep breath and jumped. The canvas tore beneath her feet, and she crashed through the top of the tent, landing hard in the dirt outside. Pain shot through her ribs, but she scrambled to her feet. The carnival seemed to pulse in response, lights flickering violently. The clowns surged toward her, climbing the torn tent flaps, their laughter mingling with the creaking of metal rides. Mara realized escaping would not be as simple as running through the woods. Mara bolted into the dense forest surrounding the carnival. Branches tore at her clothes, Roots snagged her feet, and her lungs burned with exertion. Behind her, the carnival loomed impossibly large, the big tops peak visible even through the trees. The clowns appeared at the tree line, impossibly fast, vanishing and reappearing as though teleporting through shadows. One threw a harpoon-like spear of metal, embedding it in a nearby tree, mere inches from her head. She zigzagged through the forest using every skill she had. But fear whispered, they never stop hunting. The carnival never lets go. Exhausted, Mara stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. Its walls were warped, windows shattered, but it provided temporary refuge. She barricaded the door with a rotted table and sank to the floor, gasping. Inside, she found remnants of other survivors, torn clothing, bloodstains, and scrawled messages warning, "They see your fear, it will feed them." A distant laugh carried through the broken windows. Mara pressed her back against the wall. The carnival, or the clowns, were hunting her relentlessly, and she realized something worse. They weren't just clowns. They were predators, learning from her every movement, adapting. Determined, Mara scoured the cabin for anything she could use. Broken boards, rusty nails, even old kitchen knives became makeshift weapons. She set crude traps around the perimeter, hopping to slow them down. The first clown appeared at dusk, emerging from the shadows silently. It circled the cabin, testing her traps. Mara held her breath. When it stepped onto a spiked board, it didn't scream. It just shook violently, then lunged at her, unharmed but delayed. Another followed, and another. Mara realized with a shiver, traps could delay, but they could not kill the clowns. Survival would depend on her ingenuity, cunning, and sheer luck. Desperation gave Mara an idea. The cabin's remnants of gasoline from old machinery and lanterns could be used. She rigged a crude, incendiary device, hopping to drive the clowns back or at least buy her time. As night fell, the clowns circled the cabin. Their laughter and whispers filled the air, echoing through the forest. Mara held her breath, igniting the gasoline. Flames roared to life, and for a moment the clowns recoiled, screeching in fury. But Mara knew the truth. This was only a temporary reprieve. The carnival would rebuild, the clowns would adapt, and the hunt was far from over. Survival required more than fire. It required escape from the carnival itself. Mara stumbled through the forest, following flickering lights that seemed to pulse with malevolent intelligence. The trees gave way to a clearing she had never seen before. At its center stood a towering Ferris wheel, illuminated in sickly green and purple light, moving slowly as if alive. The carnival's energy radiated from it. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and Mara realized the Ferris wheel was more than a ride. It was the heart of the carnival, the source that animated the clowns. A group of clowns emerged from the shadows, their painted faces twisted in anticipation. Mara ducked behind a toppled wagon, knowing that the carnival itself was now hunting her. Escape would require confronting the Ferris wheel, and whatever darkness powered it. From the Ferris wheel platform, a figure descended, the ringmaster. Tall, skeletal, with a grin that split his face, he carried a cane topped with a skull. His coat was black as night, tattered and fluttering as though alive. "Ah, our little guest," he hissed, voice like scraping metal. "You've caused quite a ruckus, but the carnival always wins." Mara realized the ringmaster controlled the clowns, feeding them her fear and shaping them like puppets. Every failed trap, every scream, had made them stronger, smarter. She gritted her teeth. "I won't be your puppet." The ringmaster laughed, and the ground seemed to tremble as more clowns poured from hidden tents, emerging like insects from the shadows. The ringmaster's laughter echoed as Mara ran. The clearing twisted into a labyrinth of tents, rides, and hallways that seemed to move as she passed. The Ferris wheel's lights pulsed, illuminating grotesque faces and corpses frozen mid-screen. Clowns leapt from above, from below, from the sides. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, each strike precise and deadly. Mara ducked and twisted, using broken props to defend herself, but the labyrinth seemed alive, her every step predicted. The air smelled of sugar and blood. Mara realized the carnival fed on fear itself, and each moment she panicked only made the clowns more dangerous. Exhausted, Mara stumbled into a dim tent filled with broken mirrors and remnants of past victims. To her shock, she heard whispers, human whispers, survivors. 3 figures emerged: a young man with a crowbar, a woman clutching a flare, and an old man with a shotgun. They had evaded the clowns for days, living in the carnival's shadows. "We can take them down," the man said, voice trembling but determined. "But we need to destroy the Ferris wheel, it's the source." Mara nodded. Finally, she wasn't alone. Together they began planning, realizing that the carnival itself had to be attacked, not just the clowns. Night deepened. Mara and her newfound allies gathered fuel, explosives, and broken carnival props. They set traps along the paths, hopping to slow the clowns while they reached the Ferris wheel. The ringmaster watched from above, his grin widening. The lights of the Ferris wheel pulsed, feeding the clowns' energy, sharpening their senses. Mara felt the weight of fear pressing down on her chest, but she forced herself to focus. This was no longer about survival alone. It was about ending the carnival's nightmare before it consumed everything. Every step toward the Ferris wheel brought them closer to either victory or death. Mara and her small group approached the Ferris wheel. The ground trembled beneath its massive frame, every rotation sending echoes of laughter across the carnival. Clowns leapt from shadows, claws and teeth glinting in the sickly lights. The survivors fought desperately, swinging crowbars, tossing flares, and firing the shotgun. Some clowns fell, exploding into black smoke and shards of twisted metal, only for more to take their place. Mara realized the Ferris wheel itself was the true weapon. It radiated power, animating every clown in the carnival. Destroying it meant destroying their source, but reaching it would be suicide. The ringmaster raised his cane, and the clowns surged in perfect coordination. They came from every angle, moving unnaturally fast, their grotesque faces grinning as they hunted Mara and her allies. The survivors were forced back, fighting with every ounce of strength. Blood, smoke, and flames mixed as the carnival erupted into chaos. Mara swung a crowbar at a clown leaping from above, cracking its skull, but the ringmaster laughed, a sound that made the night itself shudder. The Ferris wheel's lights pulsed, as if feeding the ringmaster's power. Mara knew that only by destroying it could they stop the nightmare, but the risk was enormous. Determined, Mara charged toward the base of the Ferris wheel. She tossed flares into the machinery, igniting fuel and twisted metal. Sparks flew and the clowns shrieked, recoiling from the flames. But the ringmaster remained calm, his eyes glowing like embers. The survivors followed, improvising weapons from the carnival's wreckage. Fire, sharp metal, and sheer desperation became their arsenal. The Ferris wheel groaned as it twisted, its shadow stretching across the battlefield like a living creature. Mara's heart pounded. Every step forward was a gamble between life and being consumed into the carnival's dark heart. The ringmaster descended from the Ferris wheel, towering over Mara. His cane struck the ground, sending shockwaves that knocked her off balance. "You cannot destroy me," he hissed. "The carnival is eternal." Clowns flung themselves at the survivors with renewed fury. Mara fought back with flares and crowbars, every strike against the ringmaster's flailing minions a battle for survival. She realized the only way to win was to destroy the Ferris wheel completely, severing the ringmaster's control over the clowns. She grabbed a line of fuel, doused the base, and braced herself for the final, desperate act. Mara struck a match, tossing it into the fuel-soaked machinery. Flames erupted instantly, engulfing the Ferris wheel. Screeches, laughter, and the sound of metal twisting filled the night. The ringmaster screamed as the power sustaining the clowns faltered. They writhed and twisted, some collapsing into smoke, others fleeing into the shadows. Mara's allies fought their way free, dragging her away from the inferno. The carnival burned, collapsing in on itself. Smoke, fire, and shadow consumed everything. When the flames died, the Ferris wheel was a twisted heap of metal, and the clowns were gone, vanished into nothingness. Mara collapsed, coughing, covered in soot and blood. She had survived, but the echoes of laughter lingered in her mind, a reminder that the nightmare might return someday. The fire burned for hours, reducing the carnival to twisted metal and ash. Mara and her allies emerged, coughing, clothes singed, eyes wide from exhaustion and terror. The forest around them was eerily quiet. No clowns, no laughter, only the crackle of dying flames. Mara's hands trembled as she looked back at the smoldering remains. The Ferris wheel lay in ruins, and yet a faint echo of the ringmaster's laughter drifted through the smoke. The survivors hugged, silent in shared relief. For now, the nightmare had ended, but Mara couldn't shake the feeling that the carnival's evil had only been delayed. Weeks later, Mara returned to Crescent Valley, trying to resume her normal life. But every shadow seemed to move. Every reflection in mirrors showed something slightly off. She woke screaming one night. A painted smile burned into the wall above her bed. The echoes of laughter haunted her dreams. The carnival had left a mark, a psychic scar that wouldn't fade. Even in daylight, Mara felt watched, stalked by unseen eyes. She realized the carnival had infected her mind, its horrors lingering beyond the physical destruction. Newspaper clippings appeared in her mailbox. Missing children, strange lights in the forest, rumors of a traveling carnival. Mara's heart sank. It was returning. She could feel it, a pulse in the air whenever night fell, the scent of smoke and sugar carried on the wind. The carnival had not been destroyed, it had adapted, growing stronger in the shadows. Mara knew she had to warn others, but who would believe her? Who could fight an evil that fed on fear itself? The nightmares became more vivid. Mara saw the ringmaster's face in every shadow, heard faint laughter wherever she went. Ordinary sounds, the creak of a floorboard, children playing, triggered flashbacks of clowns tearing through the carnival, their painted smiles frozen in grotesque delight. She tried to flee Crescent Valley, but the fear followed her. No matter where she went, the carnival's influence lingered. Mara realized the truth. Fear was the carnival's true weapon. As long as it survived in her mind, it could never truly be defeated. On a stormy night, Mara returned to the site of the burned carnival, compelled by something she could not resist. The Ferris wheel's skeleton gleamed faintly under the lightning. Shadows twisted, forming clownish shapes in the corners of her vision. A familiar whisper carried in the wind. "We're waiting for you, the show must go on." Mara's scream joined the chorus of echoes as the forest seemed to close in. Somewhere, far away or perhaps just beyond perception, the carnival breathed again, eternal, unstoppable, hungering for fear and curiosity alike. The carnival of shadows would never truly die, and Mara, and anyone foolish enough to enter its realm, would always be part of the show.